It is 6:41. We have Will Hild joining me right now. Will Hild from Consumers Research. Will, it is great to have you on. Morning, sir. What's going on? Huh?
Morning. Great to be with you.
Hey, Will, you ended up having a report coming out. Tell us first off a little bit about your Consumers Research group. You are the executive director. What is Consumers Research all about? Break it down if you could.
Absolutely. Consumers Research is the nation's oldest consumer protection organization, founded in 1929. We have a nearly 100-year pedigree of educating consumers on issues important to them and standing up for them in the marketplace. And that's what we've been doing, especially for the last 5 years since I came on, to push back against woke capitalism and the disease that causes it, ESG. We've heard about that in Wall Street, big asset managers like BlackRock pushing companies to be super woke. And that's, basically why they keep poking their fingers in the eyes of their own consumers. You think they care about their customers, but a lot of times they care more about a woke political agenda.
Yeah, and just to remind people, what does ESG stand for? I know technically people thought that it was going away, but I thought it was a little bit premature. ESG, what was it? Environmental. What's the S part for? Just help us understand that.
Yep, environmental, social, and governance. And it's billed by its supporters as just a different type of investment thesis, like value investing that Warren Buffett is famous for, or momentum investing, where you buy things that are going up and sell them when they start going down. But the truth is it's simply a stalking horse for pushing a woke left agenda with other people's money and claiming that you're doing it in line with a business thesis or a purpose to make money. And we see it not just in investments, but we see it in insurance, we see it in banking. Banks use their loan portfolios to push a woke agenda. They require certain things of companies in order to get financing. And I'm sad to say insurers, the topic of our discussion today, have also been using their policy writing to require or to force certain types of activities out of the marketplace. So it's basically an assault on all of our freedoms without ever having to go to the ballot box.
And by the way, I signed up for your woke alerts, on your website, and it was pretty easy to do. And you text message me every now and then in which you have a woke alert that you'll put out about a certain company, and here's why, and then a link to the report. And today we're talking about that, as I was jokingly calling it, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the wokest insurance company of them all. And you actually have a report on that. Maybe you can give us a kind of taste of what's happening with that, please.
Absolutely. We're going after an insurance company that a lot of people may not have even heard of, even though they're one of the biggest, and that is Chubb, C-H-U-B-B, Chubb Insurance, which has a super woke CEO who's called MAGA Policies, a threat to democracy. They've given money to an organization that supports a cop killer. And they basically, taken on this whole anti-racist, quote unquote, theology, this religion of discriminating against whites and Asians and sometimes Jews, although he's Jewish, so I doubt that. But basically, as an excuse, they use the DEI and the anti-racist theology as an excuse to violate labor laws and discriminate against people. That's what anti-racism really is about. They say that not being racist isn't enough. You have to be actively anti-racist. Well, what does that mean in practice? Discrimination.
Okay, well, not being racist, saying, hey, I'm not racist, well, that's declaring you're a racist these days, from what I understand, how that has been described. Well, you just don't understand. Look at the color of your skin. You must be racist. Oh, okay. And we meekly bow or bend our knee to this. Well, a lot of people have been tired of this. Specifically, how has Chubb? I always laughed at that name, the Chubb Insurance Company, right? C-H-U-B-B. But what have they specifically been doing? I mean, is there anything in who they'll insure? Like they'll take a look at you and say, okay, let's say you're a firearms dealer or something like that. No insurance for you. Where does it go? How do you break that down?
That's exactly right. One of the biggest things they've been doing is cutting off insurance from coal and natural gas and oil producers. So for coal, specifically, they've said that they will not underwrite any coal project. So they are actively trying to prevent these projects from being able to get insurance. And anybody who runs any kind of business knows you effectively can't operate in 2025 in the modern economy without insurance. So this is an attempt to use market share of the insurers and the necessity of their product to basically set environmental policy here in the United States. They also, as you noted, cut off insurance from the National Rifle Association Carry Guard insurance program. They had been underwriting that, and then they basically, caved to woke activists, saying they would no longer underwrite NRA men. And this isn't the National Rifle Association itself. This is NRA members who they were underwriting for insurance, and they've stopped doing that. So you're basically an assault on gun owners themselves in the way that they're operating this. So if you're a gun owner, if you like to turn on your lights and have them work, Chubb is actively undermining your way of life. And that's one of the things that people don't, I think, realize is they look and think that it's all federal policy, state policy. These things are very important. But the policies of these large financial services companies like Chubb have just as much of an effect in modern society on your way of life as the laws themselves. And so it's why it's so important to push back. And thank you for noting the woke alert system. Anyone who would like to go on to our website and sign up, it's at consumersresearch.org. It's very easy to sign up. There's a button right at the top. And we do not bombard you. You're not going to get weekly emails just because we felt the need to send something out. We send out text messages if and when it is important. And we do two things. One, we obviously have to educate consumers on the ways in which the company that we're targeting is undermining their way of life. But we don't just send you something to make you outraged. We believe in using not only your wallet, but also your voice to push back on these companies. This is what the left does. The left doesn't just say, fine, we're done with you, we're not going to use you anymore. They hassle these companies. They call these companies. They email these companies. They cajole these companies. So we always provide contact information, phone, email, social media, in order to push back online and over the phone against these companies. Let them know how you feel about their actions. And that is how we win the war for our country and for corporate America, is by using that. So again, it's not something you'll get, if people want to sign up, this isn't signing up for unlimited spam. This is very targeted. This is very specific, and it's very action oriented. So if you want to become a warrior against woke with us, you can visit us at consumersresearch.org and sign up for those woke alerts.
And like I said, very easy, and you don't pepper me with too many. I'll hear from you like maybe every week or two, or it just depends on how much comes out that you've been talking about. Consumers Research Executive Director Will Hild with me this morning. I just had a friend, Matt, who text messaged me, says, hey, Bill, Chubb is running big pop-up ads on Breitbart just recently. I just opened it up, Breitbart, and it's there right now. Are they a full-line kind of insurance company? I don't know that I have ever knowingly purchased Chubb insurance. Could you explain what they do, please?
They are underwriters of a lot of different insurers. So I do think they have a retail side, but it's not as prominent as, say, State Farm or Nationwide or something like that.
Oh.
But a lot of companies use Chubb, and a lot of organizations use Chubb. And so that's the way they try to use their market share to push a woke left agenda. I'm not surprised to hear that they are suddenly running. We launched our campaign last week, and by all reports that we've gotten through back channels, they are in full panic about being called out for their woke policies. This week, we have a billboard in Times Square running a digital billboard, so it's a cartoon, that talks about Evan Greenberg, the Chubb CEO's support for men in women's restrooms, transgender men going into women's restrooms. And it talks about, he has said that any kind of discrimination against men in women's restrooms is a quote-unquote threat to democracy. That's how insane this guy is pushing the woke left transgender ideology.
So it's a threat to democracy, which translates as Evan will threaten your insurance coverage if you're very noisily protesting it in some ways, right?
That's exactly right. It's that statement, that philosophy is a setup for them to aggressively go after people who disagree with them and basically cut them off from the insurance industry. And this, we've seen this, like I said, we saw this in the asset manager space, we've seen this in the banking space, but the insurance space, and particularly this company Chubb, it's a lot of people don't realize, how powerful that market share can be when you start cutting people off. And the other thing is, it's important not just, I know you said, tell us a little bit about their business. It's important not just for people to make sure that they aren't using Chubb, but Chubb insures a lot of government. It has a lot of government contracts, and making sure to educate your elected officials that you don't want your money. When the state acts as a customer, they're representing you. They don't have there's no obligation for the state of Texas and the state of Florida to use an insurer that pushes a woke left agenda. Educating your elected officials and saying, listen, why should we have any contracts with Chubb when they're trying to undercut our Second Amendment rights, when they're trying to push a radical left transgender ideology? That is a huge threat to them as well, because governments, state governments in particular, are some of their biggest customers. So I always, like I said, we don't want to just use our wallet. That's important. We also want to use our voice and speaking to our elected officials and letting them know they need to be picking insurance companies that believe in American principles, not in woke left politics.
Yeah, you're going to make me want to start looking at what the insurance contracts look around here in Southern Oregon and the state of Oregon in general. Hey, now when it comes to Chubb, you had talked about how Chubb will work with other insurance companies. Is this that term? I'm not an insurance agent, but I'm trying to remember what it is. Is it a big reinsurer? In other words, you'll have a State Farm that will be writing policies, and then they'll also contract with another company, perhaps like a Chubb, to back them up in case there are excess claims as a reinsurer of sorts. Do they do that kind of activity? Is that a way that they can spread their influence, bigger than their punching weight, so to speak?
Yeah, they do have some. They do have a reinsurance division. You're exactly correct in how you've described it. Their main line of offerings is commercial and personal insurance, and then accident and health coverage. But they do have a reinsurance operation. It's important to note that and to know where your insurance is ultimately coming from.
That's good. Hey, I really appreciate the take on this. So you put up a billboard on Times Square setting this guy on fire, and it's all over the woke alert here. And I'm just kind of curious, where are any of the other insurance companies big on the woke index? And the reason I bring this up is that I would have thought for sure that Flow in Progressive, being that the fact that it is Progressive Insurance, and Progressive Insurance, of course, was all about progressive principles when it was founded. Wouldn't they technically be high on that, or do they just want to do a good job of selling insurance? How do you see it, Will?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to tell you the truth, Chubb is not the only woke insurer. They're just the wokeist insurer. And you're 100% right. There are problems at a lot of these insurers. Nationwide, we went after with a woke alert earlier this year for renaming its Department of DEI to just Department of Belonging, but not changing any of their
Department of Belonging.
Discriminatory. Yes, exactly. And they don't change any of their policies. They didn't even change the stock images on the DEI webpage. They just changed the name of the page and of the person who directs their just white and anti-Asian discriminatory policies. They actually threatened to sue me over that, which was pretty funny because the evidence of their discriminatory policies is all over the internet. But so nationwide is not great. That said, State Farm, we had an issue with State Farm pushing transgender ideology on kids as young as 5 back in 2022, but they seem to have cleaned all that up. So I think it looked like it was a rogue DEI department. Surprise, surprise, they're all pushing a woke agenda. But State Farm took it, to their credit, very seriously, terminated their relationship with the NGO that was pushing that insanity, and seems to have cleaned a lot of their corporate culture up. So there are ones that are better and worse. Chubb, I would say, is the worst. Nationwide is not great. I would avoid them as well. But State Farm seems to take consumer and customer feedback very seriously. So State Farm, again, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that, anywhere in their corporate culture, but they're better than a lot of the alternatives.
Hey, well, that's good to know. Will Hild, once again, Consumers Research, consumersresearch.org. You can read up on this report. Join the woke alert. I think it's a good little way to keep informed. It's not too intrusive, but certainly know when something's going on and getting weird there. I couldn't help but think back of the transgender thing. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is going after your kids, right? You could see them.
Well, right. Well, actually, we named the campaign LikeACreepyNeighbor.com because like a creepy neighbor, they want to talk to your kids about sex.
Oh man, holding it up for derision and sarcasm is beautiful tactic, though. It really does, and it really stings. They can't do anything about that, can they? They can't fight that.
That's exactly right. And a lot of times, the funny thing is we began this conversation with a talk about ESG and how they claim it's in for the best of their business, right? But yet, the thing they're most afraid of is simply having what they're doing advertised and made known to the broader public. If woke capitalism worked so well, if it attracts so many consumers who share their values and want to see them push this nonsense, then wouldn't they want to be advertising what they're doing? Wouldn't they be running New York Times or Times Square billboards, quoting their CEO pushing for transgender men in women's restrooms. Why is it, if it's so good for business, if ESG is so important for making more money, why is it they're always trying to hide it? Why is it they're always trying to rebrand it? And that really gives it away. This is a political agenda. This is executives misusing the company that they have been. Remember, this isn't their company. Evan Greenberg doesn't own Chubb. He is a caretaker for the shareholders. And yet what is he doing? He's using it as a political utility for the far left. And being called out for that is very important. And that's why they're so afraid of it, because they know they're violating their duty to their shareholders. They're violating the fiduciary duty under their job. And it's not good for business. Getting called out for this is not good for business.
Well, is this ESG movement in the DEI, is this also part of what I've also heard termed stakeholder capitalism? Is that what they mean by that?
You're 100% right. Stakeholder capitalism is actually an attempted rebrand of ESG. And because you can talk about how we have to look at all the stakeholders, the employees, the customers, the vendors, everything, it sounds very airy and nice because, you're taking everybody's opinion into account. I've never seen it used when it wasn't, again, a stalking horse for doing whatever the politics of the executive or the C-suite wanted to do. We had a situation when we first got involved in this. We went after American Airlines and its then CEO, Doug Parker, just an awful, awful CEO, had completely destroyed that airline. They were being rated the worst in the country annually by the Wall Street Journal. And he claims to be engaging in stakeholder capitalism when he got that company in the fight against voter ID laws in Texas. And he claimed that his employees were clamoring for this. There was no evidence of that. He didn't run a poll. He didn't, I don't think he was going down and asking the baggage handlers at American Airlines what they thought of this. What he meant by that was his marketing department, his DEI department, his fellow executives all share the same far left politics. And so they used the corporate brand to push this insanity. By the way, right after taking a $4.5 billion bailout during COVID from you and me, the taxpayer. So they take our money and then they use it to push a political agenda, and that's why he's no longer there. They canned his butt, rightly so. He was a horrible CEO. But that is, again, stakeholder capitalism is just an excuse to push what the executives want at the deleterious effect to shareholders. They can drive the company into the ground and say, well, I'm doing it for all the other stakeholders.
Yeah, doing it for stakeholder, when you hear the term stakeholder, I always warn when you hear stakeholder, even in public comments and public meetings around here, stakeholder means that essentially you don't really have a direct dog in the fight, but we're going to control you anyway. That's ultimately what it means when they're talking about, it's like stakeholder capitalism. In other words, people who are not actually spending money into the company hold sway over what the company does. That's what it really is, right? It's everybody except who's actually paying the bill.
Exactly. And there are situations, to be clear, where shareholders and consumers' interests are somewhat adverse. Obviously, shareholders want to make more money, which means could be charging higher prices or lowering the quality. But in this particular case, and in general, in 2025, shareholders and customers have their interests aligned against executives who want to inject their own purposes and utilize the resources of the company for their own political objectives, rather than making money for the shareholders by serving consumers as best as they can. So few corporations are focused exclusively on that today. That basic project of doing whatever you can to serve your consumers so that you can make money has sort of gone the way of the dinosaur. And we're trying to bring it back by shining a light on these executives who've just lost all sense of their fiduciary duty to either their customer base or to their shareholders, who they ultimately answer to.
Will Hild, once again, consumersresearch.org. Go sign up for the woke alert. Stay informed on this. Read everything else that they're offering them to, and please support the group if you feel it within your heart. All right, Will, great talk, and thanks for exposing this morning. Okay, be well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always great to be with you.
You bet. My pleasure. This is a Bill